Aloha, beautiful beings, and welcome to another episode of the Yoni Havana podcast, where we explore consciousness, looking into how things work in the universe so we can enjoy life more and become more whole. My guest today is Integrative Health Coach, Advanced Kambo Practitioner, and host of the Integrative Thoughts Podcast, Matt Coffman. In this episode, Matt talks about everything Kambo, from the basics to the nitty-gritty. Why serious, sacred relationships are harder than ceremonies, why we need to shift the narrative on how men view growth and personal development, and much more. If you find value in this conversation, please share it with a friend. So enjoy this divinely masculine and heart-opening conversation with Matt Coffman. Aho.
Matt, thank you for coming on to the show. What is up, brother?
Anytime, brother. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We met a few months ago through a mutual friend, and I was driving from Tampa on the way back to Georgia where I live, and we had the conversation on biohacking, consciousness, relationships, retreats, a lot of things we're passionate about, and that was a lot of fun. And then we hung out a few weeks ago at a mastermind, biohacking mastermind, where people were teaching and learning from one another, so we had some more fun then. We thought about recording then in person. That didn't work. Here we are right now. And there's a bunch of things I want to dive into. But before we dive in, I'd love to do like a very quick breathwork exercise. Are you game for a quick exercise to get grounded?
Well, yeah, whatever you want to do, brother.
All right, let's do it. So, a bunch of times we're on the run. I got the baby in here. Nanny didn't show up for the past 2 weeks or so. So, my mind is in a lot of places. I'm trying to get a lot of things done. So I like to start every show with this very quick. So I'm going to give a quick overview. We're going to take 2 inhales, like really filling up with the air. Hold in for 5 seconds, and then a slow exhale. Ready?
In through the nose, out through the mouth?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Ready? So we're going to start with inhale, and then another one, and hold for just do one more of those. Big inhale. Another one. And hold for 5. Oh, man. Yeah, that feels good. All right. Here we are. I feel chill now. All right. So, I want to start the show with one thing that I'm excited about that I don't know much about, and I know that you know a good deal about, and that's Kambo. I'd love to hear about, from your perspective as a practitioner and somebody who's been, guiding a bunch of people through ceremonies, about benefits, risks, use cases, anything you got at me.
Yeah, so Kambo is pretty interesting. It's one of these things that gets lumped into the kind of psychedelic category, although it's actually quite different and works a lot differently. And a lot of people will do that specifically because they look at it as like ceremony and indigenous medicine, and that's kind of how the psychedelic space is. And a lot of people do find their way to Kambo from, going into these mushroom ceremonies or other psychedelic ceremonies. So it kind of makes sense that it is lumped into that same category, but it's very different. It's actually animal-based style medicine where you will use the secretion of the frog from the Amazon, the Medusa bicolor, and then you have to burn gates into the client, which is just little tiny, surface level gates. You're just trying to get into the lymphatic system there. And then you will put the frog secretion in on the skin. And it's only on for about 20 minutes. And what happens there is you're going to get some, racing of the heart, your head's going to pound, and you're going to end up purging out a lot of toxins, and you may even go to the bathroom. So I know it sounds crazy, but what I've found is that it actually works a lot better for people, especially a lot of us who have autoimmune conditions like I did. I had Lyme disease and some other, every viral infection you could think that comes along with Lyme and heavy metals. And what I found in the psychedelic space is that I would do these mushroom style ceremonies and I would have these mystical experiences, but then I would still feel very depleted and very tired for days and days on end because it was harder for my body that was in that chronic condition to get back to homeostasis. So then I found my way over to Kambo, and in the beginning, Kambo would wipe me out as well, because people who are dealing with some of these more immunological, immune system gone haywire type deals, they move around. They stir up a lot more toxins than the average person who is maybe a biohacker who's super healthy, things like that. And so did feel wiped out in the beginning, but as I kept doing the combo, it was kind of like building my immune system up. And we can get into all of the different like bioactive peptides and things that are in there, but also from the release of a lot of these toxins. So I think that a lot of people, it just depends on where you're at and how often you'll need to do that. But the benefits are kind of wild, and I've interviewed a couple people on my show who are kind of leading the camp on doing the research in that field. Todd Shipman, and then Caitlin as well. I've had her on my show, but we've been seeing things from, it's been one of the best things that we've found for Lyme disease and killing the co-infections there. A lot of anxiety, gut issues, fertility, and a lot of just where I think we're just immune compromised in today's society. And it's kind of what Caitlin likes to call a silver bullet. Nothing's really a silver bullet, but Kambo seems to get in there and kill off some of these pathogens and bacteria that, supplements and other modalities seem to not be able to get to the root cause of. So it's still kind of new. It's kind of hard to get the research out, but we are seeing benefits from a lot of immune stuff and immune compromised people from the purge, and from it doesn't, a lot of people who are dealing with the issues also, they need more than one session. So some people who come to it who just want to experience Kambo may only do one session. But if you are dealing with a chronic condition or some type of autoimmune condition, you may need like a series or a sequence of sessions as well.
Quick basic questions. When you said gates, you're talking about, this is from my understanding, so burn a little wound in somebody's arm or neck, or what's the gate exactly? I know covering some of the basic stuff.
Yeah, so the gates can be placed in different spots. There's kind of some back and forth in the community on where you should place them, but at the end of the day, you're just going to burn these little surface. I'm going to use an incense. I'm going to light it, and then I'm just going to barely touch the skin. So you're just trying to get, if you draw blood, you actually don't want to use that gate. So that's how like light, it doesn't even, people kind of jump sometimes just because it is hot and it's a natural reaction, but for the most part, it doesn't hurt at all. And then we're going to kind of wipe that off with a paper towel. And then that's where you're going to apply the Kambo, because what it does is it wants to get into the lymphatic system. And then once it's in the lymphatic system, then it'll be able to work on, many people think, wherever your body needs it most. So if you have gut dysfunction, the peptides will kind of go towards the gut first. Or if you have more neurological issues, the neuropeptides will go there first. So the gates are just how the tribes learned to apply the Kambo, and then that's how they found best. Because I think if you ingest it, I'm pretty sure you get super sick. So there really is no other way to actually apply the medicine.
And where do you usually make the gates? What part of the body?
So for the general treatments, I would like to do mostly like forearm. Upper shoulder is the most common. That's the most common, like overall systemic general treatment. But also some people like to do it on their forearm as well. The shoulder's kind of good for some people who may have to hide the gates for work or whatever they're doing as well. So it's easy to put a shirt on and kind of go over the gates that are on your shoulder. But there's also like other ways. People do it in the ears. People do it on different chakra points in the back to try to target different chakra regions. And then there's also some people who are more well-versed in like acupuncture will use actual specific like liver and kidney, different meridian points as well, which is a little bit more advanced. I would have to kind of get out my book and look and find where the acupuncture points are, because I'm not an acupuncturist. We did learn it in our training, but it's like, I would have to like research where all these points are. So I usually do more generalized treatments, and then I will do chakra treatments if somebody is specifically trying to work on like their heart chakra or their sacral chakra or things like that.
Mm-hmm. So meaning if somebody's putting that on an acupressure point and starting from that point, they get a bigger dose of the what is this? The toad venom? Remind me, what's the medicine itself?
So the common misconception is that people like to call it a venom, and,
Mhm.
a poison or a venom. It's not really, if you dig into it, I don't think it's poisonous at all. I mean, I don't really see, we haven't seen anybody who's died from Kambo or get sick super ill from Kambo unless it was a water issue. Usually the fatal stories that we've heard in Kambo ceremonies come from practitioners who haven't been trained and they don't know exactly how much fluid to give the person before the um, actual ceremony. Having said that, it's more just the frog secretion. The frog is going to use that secretion in the jungle so that predators don't eat them, because you can get really sick if you eat the secretion. But what they found is that it works really well with our physiology if you burn the gates and use it in the lymphatic system, and you can absorb the peptides. And they've seen that the peptides will stay in the system for at least about 30 days as well.
Cool. And sorry for my ignorance there. What's secretion?
Basically, it's like kind of like a fluid that'll excrete out of the skin of the frog when they feel like they're about to be attacked. So they basically don't really have any predators in the jungle, because the predators basically know that the frog, when it feels stressed and it feels like something's going to come try to attack it, it will release that secretion. And then the snake or whatever is trying to get that frog will get really sick. So they don't really have any predators in the jungle because of that reason.
I gotcha. Very cool. And when you talk about peptides, what are those? What are peptides?
So peptides is like all the craze in the biohacking community now. If anybody's really deep in the weeds, like we are, you've heard of BPC 157, thymosin alpha, LL37 is one that I use when I had Lyme. It's like an antimicrobial. Well, what they've found is this Kambo secretion, it has dozens, if not hundreds of peptides. I don't even know if we've isolated them all. And they're basically just short chain amino acids, basically very, very small proteins that the body can really use. And they're very bioavailable for that matter, especially the ones in the Kambo as well. And they have all different of these peptides in there. Some work on the gut, some work on the brain, some work on, just fertility. And each peptide has a different mechanism of action that it works on. And what we found is that they've tried to isolate these peptides because they've seen the benefits. Some work on the opioid receptors for pain, some are anti-inflammatory, but they haven't really been able to isolate them in a lab. And Ian Mitchell, I think, is kind of trying to work on that, but I'm not sure if they'll be successful. It's kind of my thought process that the secretion in and of itself, that the peptides are going to work synergistically. They're going to work together. So you kind of need all of them at once. And I do think you're going to have to go through the ceremony. But I guess if anybody would pull that off, it would be Ian Mitchell, who would be able to isolate those peptides.
So a peptide is a medicine. Do you know what a peptide is? Because I'm still, I've heard about a lot of peptides, and a friend of mine got a peptide injections in his ankle for injuries and such. But I'm not really sure what peptides are, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they're very, very short, very tiny amino acids. They're basically like very, very tiny, small proteins. And that's why the peptides work, because they're kind of like signaling molecules. So they're going to help to upregulate the system depending on what the body may need or what it does. And then some of them are, antimicrobial, which I think is probably the most potent reason why a lot of people get the benefits they do from Kambo. So, you can have mystical experiences when working in a psychedelic space that are super, super great for emotional baggage and trauma and childhood trauma. But not always is it working at the core kind of physical 3D level. And that's where I think Kambo comes in, working with the viruses and the candida and the mold. Those are the things that Kambo actually can kind of get in there, kill, tackle. You'll purge them up. And if someone's real sick, you may even give some supplements to kind of help them detox through that for a couple of days as well.
Speaking of Ian Mitchell, I listened to your episode with Ian Mitchell, and I've been following Ian Mitchell for the past few years. I got his 660 from 360 Health back in the day before he started Wizard Sciences. And that conversation is amazing. So anybody who's listening to this, you got to go check out Matt's episode with Ian Mitchell. That was one of my favorite episodes. It was amazing. I mean, first of all, kudos to you for becoming such a great interviewer. Conversation was flowing, and Ian is not only a wealth of knowledge, but he's funny, and he has a lot of great stories, and he's able to explain concepts that are high level in layman terms. So quick side note there. You got to go check that conversation out for anybody who's interested in C60 and Ian Mitchell and consciousness and all that. Question for you. So you said Kambo is good for Lyme disease, but and I also heard you, like, let's say Kambo could be killing things in the body. So I was thinking about ivermectin and how people say ivermectin could be dangerous for people with parasites because we don't want to kill the parasites in the body. So what happens perhaps with Kambo? Like, do the parasites come out? I mean, I know you have a good amount of experience with just parasites and Kambo and all that. What's the process there?
So there actually has been Todd Shipman that I've had on my show. If anyone wants to listen to that and get a deep dive, we did like a 3-hour discussion. He's actually had some of these purges that come out of people analyzed, and you do see parasites and you do see mold and you see candida in there and different things. And a lot of people do focus on the purge, but I also think that things that don't come up inside of the purge is also still processed by the body. And that's why people get a little sick and a little fatigued after they do Kambo, if they do have a lot of these parasites and different bacterial and viral infections. So the peptides seem to be killing off these. A lot of these microbes are super, super smart. They create biofilms. They try to hide in each and every way away from whatever supplement protocol that you're trying to throw at them to kill them off. And so they're very smart. And I think that Kambo is kind of like this foreign substance, something that the body's, they're not used to it. They're used to these herbs. Mm-hmm. You've been throwing these herbs and different supplements at them for quite some time. But then Kambo kind of comes in and it breaks up the biofilms, kills them off, and then you also purge them out. And you're going to purge up a lot of that bile that's in the liver. So you're kind of going to get like a little oil change for the liver in that process as well.
It's amazing. So I just had post that retreat. There was some red tide in there. I don't know if it's in connection, but my wife had strep throat like a week before. My lymphs were really swollen. It didn't happen. I don't think it ever happened to me in my life. And then I got this really strong ear pain, like just like built up all of a sudden, like in the afternoon, lasted for like an hour and a half and then slowly degraded. And also as soon as it came on, like I was quite in the amount of pain. My daughter's like, "Are you okay, Daddy?" I'm like, this is like, and I've been in a good amount of pain in my life before. I've been working with an injury now for the past 3 years, was born with scoliosis. Like I've been with pain, but anyways, like this is quite uncomfortable. So anyways, I went to the cold plunge. I'm cooling it. I'm trying to get some, fluids to move down. I'm shaking my head, like shaking between my ears. I'm taking C60. I'm taking some homeopathics. Didn't sleep that great that night. Woke up. I'm still in pain. Get some more sleep, and eventually he went off. But I was thinking about Kambo, and as you were talking about lymph, and I was wondering, and I'm wondering on your perspective, if somebody like you is a practitioner, if something like lymph nodes are getting swollen, and like what would you do? Would you like go and make like a gate and like let's flush it out?
That I'm not sure if lymph nodes are swollen. I've never worked with that in particular in my case, but I do know as a practitioner, since I have it on hand, if I do get anything that comes up sort of like that seems a little off, that my normal supplement stacks or my ozone isn't working for, I will do even a microdose point of Kambo. And I'll notice anti-inflammatory effect from that. I'll get better sleep from that. Things that are a little bit tougher, like when you are going through something like that, you kind of have like you run a fever, you can't sleep that well, you feel a little inflamed. So when I do go through anything like that, little common cold or a little viral infection, I do a microdose point, which is different. You won't purge from that experience, but you do get the peptides into the lymph system. So it'll kind of help to upregulate and modulate the immune system. So to fight off any kind of little pathogen that's creeping in. So I would have probably done a microdose personally.
Cool. And how often do you do Kambo these days?
It's interesting because in the beginning I was doing it quite often. And my tolerance got really high. I kept going. There was a point where I did 24 dots in one session in training.
Wow.
Like that's how much my tolerance got up because I was doing it so often. And now I just kind of do it as I feel called. I feel as a practitioner, I should sit with it regularly just so I am kind of in the space, and I can stay connected to the medicine and connected to what people are going through as well during their ceremony. You know, you don't want a combo practitioner who's done combo once. You want a combo practitioner who's done combo quite a bit. So now I do it like every few months, but in the beginning it was a lot more often, probably like once a month. And then as I kind of regain some balance from the Lyme and all the autoimmune stuff, I do it maybe every few months. And I took a long break for a while because my tolerance was so high. I wanted to kind of reset my tolerance. I didn't want to have to burn 24 gates on my forearm every time I did combo. So there was a point where I didn't do it for like 5 months to kind of just bring my tolerance level back down. And now I do like 7 or 8 points every few months, and then usually some microdoses in between just to kind of help modulate the immune system.
And what's an average amount of points that a client who's coming for a few sessions would do? When you say 24 is super high, you do 7, 8. What does an average person do?
Yeah, it's just, for the record, 24 is really fucking high. Like it's like most people are never going to get there. I kind of had a higher tolerance just off the beginning, so I think there might be something to do with, Todd said, like, if someone's has a little bit more muscle mass, they can usually do some more combo points, and that seemed to be the case for me and some of the people that I've served as well. But usually, depending on the medicine, or I guess we should start there. People get medicines from different places, and some tend to be, from my experience, a little bit weaker than some others. So some people come into the ceremony with this idea that their friend went somewhere and they did 4 points and that was very tough for them, so they don't want to do any more than 3 or 4 points. But the stick that I have could be more potent or it could be less potent. It just really depends on who's really harvesting the combo and what kind of integrity they have and things like that. But I get a pretty potent medicine, so usually people only need like 3, sometimes like 5 dots. Just depends on if they've done it recently, if they've done it a lot. But I can usually get people to purge off anywhere from 3 to 5. And then if they start doing it more regularly and they're working with it, they can go up a little bit more as well. But usually off 3 to 5, someone can purge.
Speaking of potency, I remember when you told me that you turned on the quantum upgrade from Lila Quantum in your house and it affected the medicine. Have you turned it off and seen what happened since?
Yeah. So I bought one more stick and then noticed that the thing is, it's still potent and they go through it, but they're less likely to purge, is what's super interesting. They'll purge up the water, and then they won't get the like second wave of purge. That's like the deep bile. And really that's okay, because getting the peptides in the system is really more important than the purge, in my opinion. But you do want to try to get that purge out, that kind of bile, because if not, then the body has to process all of that. So you'll have like more of like a headache, more of a fatigue kind of thing. So you do want to try to get that second purge if you can. So yeah, I've recently taken the quantum upgrade off of the house. It's, it works really well still, and people get great benefits from it. But I would rather, if people are coming to me for that purgative effect, I want that to happen. So I don't know what's going on there. Me and Todd have tried to speculate on it, kind of maybe just neutralizing the actual purgative effects of it. It seems like the peptides are still working. People still feel really great afterwards, but they're not really purging during the ceremony.
Gotcha. And when working with you, let's say one-on-one or in your retreats, what is usually the frequency that, and I'm going to go for the average person, or somebody who, let's say even somebody with a chronic disease, or somebody who just feels like they want to clean up. They want to clean up their body, whether they're a biohacker or they have something going on for a long time. What would be the protocol? Once a week for 3 months, once a month for 6 months? What is, and I know it differs between people, but is there an average there in terms of, so, for the people who are listening, they're like, oh, I'm interested in doing combo. Like, what should they be preparing for in terms of frequency and, to get a good amount of benefit to clean up their body?
Yeah, so it will be dependent upon the client. But if you are dealing with some autoimmune stuff, you're going to want to probably do 3 sessions in 3 weeks. It's kind of been like the standard to start it off, to get the body a nice cleanse. And then from there, maybe like once a month, once every 2 months. It'll really depend on how much you're struggling and what you're dealing with. But I usually tell people, anyone who's actually dealing with something, 3 times in a moon cycle, so 3 times in 3 weeks. And then from there, we can kind of gauge how you feel and see if you want to do it like once a month and kind of like I did, and then kind of go down to once every 2 months and then maybe quarterly. Really just depends. And some people just love the feeling of the peptides in there, and they're going to hit you up every month.
That's cool. By the way, so what's a microdose of Kambo? Is it like 10% of regular dose, or what's the percentage there?
It's just 1 dot. So if you do 2, because you have to think, some people are purging off of 3. So if you do 2, you might be super uncomfortable. But with 1, you just get a little bit of the kind of like, you'll hear a little bit of pounding in your head. You'll get a little hot, but for the most part, it'll go away after about 10, 15 minutes. And then usually I actually flip the point, because if you wet the points and flip them, you'll kind of start to get another release of the Kambo medicine in your system as well. So I like to kind of put 1 dot on, and then after the rush kind of goes away after about 10, 15 minutes, I'll wet it and flip it. I'll get another little wave, but it won't be as heavy as the first wave. And then I'll hold it on for about 30 minutes total.
When you say you wet it, you wet the stick? What's being wetted?
I'm going to get a little bit of water on the knife that I use and just kind of drip it on the point, and then I'll flip it over. So like the backside of the medicine will start to go into that gate that I burned open. And sometimes I use that even during someone's ceremony as well. So say that it's their first time, I put 3 or 4 dots on, and I don't think that they're purging quite enough. Like they're looking like they're having a little bit of a struggle to purge. You can wet those dots or wet them and flip them, and they'll get another rush of the medicine. And then sometimes that'll be enough to make them purge it out.
Cool. What's the average time of a session? And kind of what's also the average time of like the peak, you would say, of the discomfort?
The discomfort is usually the whole 20 minutes that the Kambo is on. But if you take into consideration the whole ceremony, the recovery, it usually is about 1.5 hours, 2 hours total. And we can get into the ceremonial part if you want, with the sananga and the hape and the music and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Because my follow-up question is right there, and I'm a big fan of both sananga and hape. I've been using those for years now, ever since I was introduced to them in Peru, in the Sacred Valley of Peru. I was there on an ayahuasca retreat, and but I have not done Kambo yet, which is why I wanted to start with Kambo. But yeah, I'd love to hear your whole kind of ceremony protocols there. Like, do you combine hape and sananga at the same ceremony usually? What's your protocol there?
Yeah, so everyone, like when they reach out to a practitioner, is going to be a little bit different. I personally like the ceremonial aspect of it. I think that a lot of Western people kind of don't really have ceremony around anything. They don't really have anything that they call sacred, and nothing's really a ceremony. I mean, we don't even really cook our food anymore. So it's like we've lost touch with pretty much anything that connects us with ourselves and to other people. We're just on Netflix, we're on our phone, we're at work. We're not having meaningful conversations or relationships. So I think the ceremony is a good way to, put the phone down, really be present, and really go through the whole system and the whole workings of kind of some. And to be clear, I guess I'll side note on this: the ceremonial use of Kambo is actually a Westerner thing. If you go down to the jungle, they're just going to slap the Kambo on you, and you're just going to go puke in a bush and go to the bathroom in a bush or the river or whatever. They don't do ceremonies around Kambo. They do it around the ayahuasca and everything else, but they don't really do a ceremony around Kambo. But that being said, I think that the ceremony is powerful, because we're going to burn the sage, we're going to clear the air, we're going to set some intentions, maybe say a prayer. And all of that are things that I believe that we're missing a lot in Western society. So some practitioners aren't as ceremonial as others, and either way, the Kambo will work and do what it needs to do. But I like to do the ceremony because I think it draws connection. You have the indigenous music playing. For me, that's how I was trained in it, and I like to do the ceremonial style stuff.
That's beautiful. So sananga and hape are part of the ceremony. They're in the beginning, they're in the end.
So everyone does that a little bit differently as well. And I always tell people that the sananga and the hape is definitely optional. So you don't have to do either of those. If, I'm not going to force anyone to do Kambo or force anyone to do any of the additives. If they think that me blowing hape up their nose is crazy, then just skip it, But On the other hand, there is a part of me that has noticed that you will have a much better experience if you do work with those medicines beforehand. And I've tried to play with some after and some before. And I like to do them both before. So generally, I'll start with the sage to clear the air, clear the room, set the stage. And then I will do the hape or the sananga first, actually. So we'll do the hape or the sananga eye drops, which for those who don't know are these Amazonian eye drops that burn like fucking crazy. They're actually really tough. I stepped down to using the medium strength instead of the high dose because it was a little bit too much for people who have never tried it. If you do it regularly, you kind of get used to it. You build up a tolerance to it, but most people aren't using it regularly. So I found that the medium strength actually is a lot more gentle and easier for people to do. And they use that in the jungle for kind of like hunting, night vision, clearing bad energy, all kinds of different like spiritual aspects and physical hunting styles aspects as well. But I think that it kind of sets the stage for this sort of release that you can get because you want to surrender to the experience. There's a lot of people who are kind of personality types, real driven, real A-type people who they don't like to surrender. So if I can get them to do the sananga and the hape before the ceremony, it kind of already starts to facilitate this surrender, right? Because there is no other option. I put them eye drops in your eyes and you open your eyes. You have to surrender to it. It's there. It burns like shit. It goes away in a few minutes, but you will start to notice some mental clarity. You'll gain more presence. You'll be a little grounded. You'll kind of be into your body just off the sananga eye drops alone. And then after you've kind of recovered from a few minutes of that, I'll go into the hape. And I like to use a special blend that the mother of the tribe who makes it, she makes it during a full moon, during an ayahuasca ceremony. So it's real spiritual kind of blend. And it's very, very feminine because some of the hape strands can be very powerful, almost like a stimulant. And that to me isn't what I want for Kambo. Really great as just, if you just want to do that solo by itself and do a kind of ceremony that kind of uplifts you and gives you a little bit more energy. Those types of strands are great, but I like a more grounding one for Kambo because a lot of people already come into the situation if they've never done it with a little bit of anxiety. They're asking a lot of questions. They're like, well, I got to puke. What if I shit my pants? Like, they're asking all sorts of like silly questions, right? So the sananga and the hape, I think, kind of lowers that level of anxiety, gets them grounded, makes them more able to surrender to the situation. And then once we apply the Kambo, they're kind of already more in it and more present, in my opinion. And it seems to make the ceremony go a lot easier.
Oh, that makes sense. And I want to touch lastly with regards to Kambo on the risks, because he talked about, some of the fatal stuff had to do with water or water intake. So, just want to hear about risks. Are there any risks for people that are taking any anti-anxiety medicines or specific medicines, SSRIs? Anything that would be useful for people who are interested in this?
So this is going to also be very different from each practitioner because it's going to be up to their discernment on whether or not they want to work with you if you are on a bunch of meds. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I try not to turn down a lot of people who are on like SSRIs or anxiety stuff because Kambo can be good for anxiety. So maybe there's a potential that a pathogen or a bacteria or a virus is causing that anxiety in the first place, or maybe mold. Mold could be easily causing anxiety. And that's why the people are even on the anxiety meds in the first place. Where you got to draw the line sometimes is maybe when people have like borderline personality disorder or multiple personality disorder, because they're usually on some like balancing sort of meds and you don't want to really throw them off kilter. Some people will still work with them. That's kind of where I maybe draw the line. I'm not worried about a little bit of anxiety, but if you are like multiple personality, that's a little bit tough, and that's a little bit out of my level of expertise. Also, if you've had like some heart conditions, strokes, things like that, like if you're not cleared to do 20-30 minutes of cardio, you probably don't want to do Kambo. It's going to feel like you're doing an intense exercise session. Your heart's going to be racing. your blood pressure drops. There's things that go on in the ceremony that if your doctor hasn't cleared you to do a good, like high intensity 30-minute cardio session, then you probably aren't a good fit for Kambo. What else is there? For the most part, it's relatively safe as long as it's done with the right practitioner in the right amount. But there are a few kind of contraindications as far as a few medications, like the psychiatric stuff, and then any kind of like heart condition, things like that.
And when it comes to hydration, are people instructed to drink a lot of water before, or not to drink a lot of water before? Well, you mentioned something about hydration or water earlier.
Yeah, so you're going to come into the ceremony fasted, and I usually tell people to drink minimal water as well, because it's a little hard for people to drink 1.5 liters to 2 liters before the ceremony. That's, can be tough on someone's stomach because you have to drink it really fast. It's not like you get an hour to drink it. You have to drink it within, 8 to 15 minutes. So you're kind of chugging these couple liters of water. And you want that water because you want that purge to come up. Like the act of sitting there and dry heaving is terrible. And where some practitioners have went wrong who haven't been trained is they just keep giving people more water to try to help the purge come up. And if that person doesn't have enough Kambo on, or they just are a person who doesn't purge that easily, and you just keep giving them water, you can create what's called hyponatremia. And it's basically just like a sodium imbalance, electrolyte imbalance that really, and the brain will start to swell. I mean, you will die. You will go to the hospital. So if you're working with a guy who just bought a couple sticks off a line and he hasn't really been trained in the proper water procedure and how to handle everything if something goes wrong, then you're really putting yourself at a risk. It's not just something that should be taken lightly. It's not that complicated of a task to learn. Like you really could go to the jungle and learn how to apply the medicine in a couple days. But the people in the jungle aren't dealing with the same issues that people are dealing with in Western society. They're not on a bunch of medications. They don't have diabetes. They don't have SSRIs. They kind of live off the land with minimal kind of illnesses. So where you want a good trained practitioner is because of the Western world, we have a lot of other issues going on and a lot of medications thrown in the mix. So sometimes if I don't know a medication, I will look up on my practitioner group. Like, I can just do a quick keyword search, like type in the medication, see who's worked with a patient who's been on that medication. Because there's just so many people start saying, I'm on this, and this. They're on like 5 things. So I got to look it up. So, but the water is a big one. That's probably the biggest risk of anything is over giving people more and more water and just keep feeding them water. And then you'll cause that hyponatremia. And that's where people have died.
And that sounds similar to what people experience sometimes at the club when they're taking Molly or ecstasy and they keep drinking water and chugging water. And as you're saying, they're depleted of minerals, depleted of salts perhaps, and they're just collapsing. It sounds very similar, perhaps the same thing.
Yeah, the salt is actually anybody who is trying to do these Kambo ceremonies stacked with ayahuasca, which is like a common theme. I actually have a woman who comes to me like quarterly before she does ayahuasca ceremony to kind of cleanse before the ceremony. And a lot of these people are on these low salt diets, which is not good for Kambo. I try to advise them people to not follow the salt part of the dieta if they're going to do Kambo beforehand because of that reason. Because I'm giving them all these liters of water, you haven't had any salt in your system for a week or 2 weeks or however long the dieta is. And that can actually be fatal as well with Kambo. So you have to kind of have some discernment and ask questions and have a good intake, especially if these people are using other plant medicines.
Gotcha. Very cool. And actually, one more question came to mind on that. So have you seen any differences when people do Kambo ceremonies during like a full moon or if it's storming outside? I personally have seen, in ceremonies that I've been a part of now with Kambo with different medicines, like if it's stormy outside, the experience itself is more intense. I wonder if it happens the same thing with Kambo.
So I haven't actually had anyone who's tried Kambo like specifically schedule it within a full moon. So that I don't know. I haven't had any experience with that.
Do you know, have you ever been like around a storm or something? Just like storming outside or like super windy or like monsooning outside? Or
No,
I
I
mean, I know
haven't
you
done
live
any
in
combo
Florida.
during that. I will say that one time I was doing a mushroom ceremony during a crazy thunderstorm in Tampa, and I was like on the balcony, like holding my crystal necklace, and like I was staring at the storm and like talking to God. And at this time, I was like thought I was an atheist. It was a bizarre experience. Like I had a very heightened experience in this mushroom ceremony when it was a thunderstorm outside. So I can imagine combo could be similar, but I haven't done anyone during a thunderstorm.
On that note, was this your first mushroom ceremony, the one
I,
that you're speaking of?
I think it was like my second or something like that. It was like the
Okay.
second time I'd done it, and it blew me away how much the thunderstorm actually changed the entire experience.
Yeah, so I've seen in different mushroom ceremonies where there's storms, like the weather is calm and people's experiences are not as heightened. Whether I've seen a few storms by now, and people's experiences are, I mean, on the inside, on the outside, it's chaotic and it's just like way tougher. Same dosage, same strains, same set and setting, same ceremony, but way. And I've seen it in myself too. Like it's storming outside, I'm like, all right, we're going on a ride, and I think it's a consciousness level. There's a consciousness to wind, there's a consciousness to storm, and it's going on the outside. Now we're connected, and it's going on the inside. I mean, it's in that what Philip from Lila Quantum calls it's in the field. It's in this energy that connects all of us. And I think once we're more tuned into it, now we're more a part of it rather than just kind of observing it from the outside. But I do want to actually, when you touched on atheists, and I had a very similar experience where I declared myself an atheist when I was 13, and I was convinced by one of my best friends then, very logically, my family perished in the Holocaust. I was like, oh, I mean, there's, all kinds of things led to me like, why would there be a God if these are the circumstances? I live in a country. I was born into a country where there's fighting at the borders. I have to go to the military in a few years. This is how it is. This is quite a sucky experience. Doesn't seem like somebody is creating, orchestrating this experience, especially, let's say, not for me that way. I'm like, okay, so this is what it is. This is the one life. I'm in this third dimensional body, and I'm gonna make YOLO. I'm gonna make the most of it. And then I went through the army, and I moved to the States, and over time, I'm like, okay, I mean, I was a bit overconfident and cocky by saying I'm atheist. Like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know. I became agnostic, and only once I've done mushrooms, I had a taste of spirituality. But once I've done ayahuasca, I'm like, okay, like, all right, here's the force. I was like, kind of slapped by the hand of God in that way. I'm like, you doubted me? Here you go. And and I still don't view God is one entity that is being talked about in a lot of religions. Definitely not him or a dear father. It's that, I see it as this all encompassing consciousness that makes the computers that we're currently talking through, and the microphone. To me, it's the energy, that connects everything. And it's an immense force that it's hard to grasp, especially or talk about in these bodies. But I'd love to hear about your perspective change, because you said you were an atheist, and then there's a flip there. It sounds like a similar story, so I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there that actually just resonated with me, and maybe that was, I wasn't born into like a family in the Holocaust, but I was born in Flint, Michigan, so very shitty conditions, a lot of crime and drugs, and my father wasn't around, and that single mom who was just bartending to try to make it through. And then I had a very, like you said, logical, very, very smart. I thought he was too smart to even be a teacher at my high school. He probably should have been like a professor somewhere. Like he was just absolutely brilliant when it came to like chemistry and physics. And he taught a lot of evolutionary stuff, and it just made sense to me. And I kind of held on to that throughout college, throughout everything, was just kind of partying, was just like, I'm just living in this 3D physical body. I'm just working out. I'm just getting laid and getting drunk, just, just making money and just living. Thought that was the end experience. I thought that's just what we did until we passed away, just no thought process around it at all. Became addicted to a lot of different drugs and alcohol and sex and just food, just pretty much anything that would kind of comfort me. And then I had a friend. I mean, I didn't dislike anything that I tried. Sex, drugs, I was a little, whatever hit that dopamine rush, I was in for it. And I got introduced to Tim Ferriss actually, because I always kind of like to learn and read and everything, and I'd never really been into podcasts. And I started hanging around with this guy who was super smart, and he put me on to Tim Ferriss's podcast. And at first, it was just like I was listening to these business podcasts, and I was like, "Wow, man, these people are really next level who are on here." And then he starts coming out with like all these like psychedelic experience podcasts, and I'm like, "What in the hell?" Because Tim Ferriss really isn't that guy. He's like, from before to after, like he's really shifted. Like if you listen to his older stuff and like read his books, it's just like, how do you make money? How do you work less? How do you set up, programs and procedures where you're kind of outsourcing things, 4-hour work week stuff. And then he starts putting out all these different podcasts. And then Tools of Titans came out. So I bought that book, and there was like a whole section on psychedelics in there. So I started like doing little micro doses. I'm like, whatever, he's talking about microdose, and let's see what that's about. Like I've done all these other drugs. What's a little bit of mushrooms going to hurt? And I thought that experience was pretty cool, right? Like I felt a little more tapped into my body. I felt a little happier, a little bit more creative. And then I started getting into like Terrence McKenna and all these things. And he's like, take 5 grams of mushrooms and sit on your couch in your apartment and see what happens. And he's explaining all these mystical experiences. And I'm like, sounds absolutely insane. But like I said, coming from my addictive background, I felt, well, what could it hurt? Let's see what happens. And so I take the 5 grams, and it was just blew me away. I had, I didn't know what I was doing really. I was doing it by myself. I wasn't with a guide. I was just like, I'm going to fucking try this thing. My wife thought I was absolutely insane. She didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm like, I'm just taking 5 grams while you're gone at work. Don't worry about it. Like I'll be here when you get back. And
That's
so
very brave.
It ended up just shattering like so many paradigms that I had, especially around like, like I thought I didn't really ever care that my father wasn't around. And then you realize how much that played a part into all your addictions and all of your tendencies and habitual patterns. And at the end of it, it just seemed like all I could think about was like, that's what God feels like. Like that's what like the universe or some form of like there's a different energy out here. There's something different from this like drinking surface level, like small, minute, like conversations that we're having around nothing and watching sports and just like really just wasting time. And it just shattered me open. And then the first one, I still didn't really, I got a little bit more spiritual. Like I was doing veganism and was like doing some yoga, but didn't really like ever say God or there was like spirits. And then I had that next experience where it was the thunderstorm. And I felt like the whole time I was just talking to God and just asking for guidance and asking for clarity and help and sobriety and whatever I was trying to deal with at the time. And ever since then, I just never doubted it. And it sounds crazy because if you tell someone who's never sat through one of these experiences that you talk to God or that you healed past life traumas, that some of the things that you have going on in this current situation, say you have, whatever, you look at some of these child molesters or you look at these people who do mass murders, that's potentially something that they did in a past life that's carrying on into this life. And then there's also trauma that gets involved, and some of these people are on a lot of meds and different things that we fuck them up even worse. But people think you sound crazy when you say it might be them kind of reliving out a past life. And I've healed past life traumas in these ceremonies, things that weren't involved in this lifetime. They literally were outer body. I was shaking, trembling, and it was all past life stuff that I was letting go. So it sounds absolutely batshit crazy. I understand. I thought it was batshit crazy. But once you go through it, you start to realize that there is more going on in this universe, energetically, quantumly, whatever label you want to slap on it. It's so real that you can't really unsee it. Once you've seen it, it's there. No one else can tell you differently. It's set in stone. And so for anybody who's maybe thinks it's a little woo-woo or sounds a little crazy, I would say definitely find a good guide. Don't do what I did. Find someone who will help you through that. I'm a little bit more of I was crazy. I didn't know where to find a shaman. I was just like, I know where to find mushrooms though. So I just did it myself. But I would suggest getting a guide now that I've done it quite a bit. And you'll see for yourself. You will start to talk to spirits or see different energies, and you will look at the world in a different way. My opinion.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I mean, this is only a few years ago. I was poo-pooing, when I met my wife, she was talking about soulmates and she's talking about past lives. Not that much, but I was like, just forget about it. Like, don't even bring this up with me. I'm like, this does not even exist, and now I'm in the woo, and I like to tell people, like, a few years ago, I was not in the woo at all. I was running a
Mm-mm.
startup. I mean, side note on Tim Ferriss. So I started listening to his podcast right when it came out. I was living in San Francisco, right next to San Francisco CrossFit, where I was going there 5 days a week. And he was good friends with Kelly Starrett, who started this CrossFit box, one of the most famous CrossFit boxes ever. And they were running these XPT retreats. And I see Tim Ferriss there, and I listen to his podcast, like either that day or a couple of days before, that he's not investing in any startups. But I'm running a startup, and I go to Tim. Hey, Tim, I'd love to tell you about a startup that I have. Here's what it is. And he looks at me. He's like, he's really good at, like, rejecting people without saying no. It's like, I have a good friend named Yoni. And he just, like, completely, like, doesn't even talk about it. But that was a fun experience talking to Tim, because I was like deep into the startup world. I'm trying, I'm working, and my intentions, I said this is altruistically. I built a tool to highlight articles on the web so people can learn things, and especially if they don't have the time, or saying they don't have the time to dive into something, like, here's the meat. Like, Matt knows about Kambo. Here's, like, just read this like a few paragraphs highlighted. Anyways, I go in and I talk to Tim, and I live in this third dimension world. And what I realized, interestingly enough, I was doing this for money, most importantly, and two, to impress my father. I'm like, oh, I mean, I'm doing all, this is all in hindsight. These are all the things that I learned, only once I got introduced to medicine. I was starting to do medicine in a way that I never even looked into. Like, it really, as you're saying, like, a bunch of people like Tim Ferriss and now Michael Pollan, and people that were more on the logical side of things, and the more, let's say, normies looked into it, and then inspired a bunch of people that were listening to them. And now there's a great awakening. And I'm like, yeah, of course, past lives. I've done some ceremonies. I get sent to some visions of the Holocaust, and I'm doing some healing there, and I'm feeling like I'm really healing generational stuff. And that's what I felt like I was doing in ayahuasca, when I really was, like, the hand of God with, like, some tough stuff. I'm like, I'm not feeling anything from this life. This feels some real ancestral stuff, I'm like, oh shit, like, this shit exists, And yeah, it took some humbling, and it took a change of perspective. But as you said, like, once there's no going back. I mean, that knowing is way deeper than anybody telling anything to my mind. It's in my heart, it's in my veins, it's in my DNA. It's done. It's set in stone. There's no changing. There's no going back. Once you open that door, you can close the door and go back, which is cool. So yeah, kudos to the medicine, and kudos to the people, and especially you, for doing bravery, for doing this. I do not recommend anybody doing this on their own. If they feel like they're savage and they're so stable and they want to do it on their couch, I mean, I'm not going to go and stop anybody, but I definitely, as you said, I do not recommend it to anybody. Ceremonial stuff and guidance, and somebody holding the container, is something that is much more safe and recommended, and can bring much more benefit. I do want to talk about something, because, you said you grew up, father wasn't around, Flint, Michigan, and all that. And now, I've met your wife briefly, but the way you talk about your wife, and the way, you told me about, you're planning on having kids in the future. I'd love to hear about how much you've grown as a man, and you've done all this work, and how differently you see relationships and showing up as a husband and father, rather than what you were introduced to as a young child.
Yeah, so apparently my mother, like, kicked my dad out when I was only a few months old. She found him smoking crack in the basement. Like, I think he used to party and maybe do coke, but it was Flint in the 80s, and he probably just upgraded to crack. Probably maybe didn't know it was as harmful as it was. And so she got him out of there, and he was never around. And then kind of had a few deadbeat stepfathers who, like, sold drugs. And one dude was a construction worker, but he was like a drunk, people she would meet at the bar, more than likely, obviously, because she was a bartender. So it wasn't ever really good role model. So I didn't know anything about it. So I was kind of always like a savage from that aspect. And my mom had a traumatic kind of childhood too. She was hurt. My grandfather was very abusive. My grandmother actually left all I don't know if it was because my grandpa was abusive. I don't know the whole story, but something pretty bad had to happen, because my grandma left all of her kids with my grandpa. So he was just a single father. And I think that that's definitely got to be intuitive on how abusive that he, or just bad he could have been, because a mother's first instinct is to leave with all of her children instead of leaving the
Yeah.
children. So I don't know what the situation exactly was, but it couldn't have been good, because I don't think that motherly instincts really react in that manner. I think that a normal person who felt like she could get away with all of her kids would have done that. So maybe she just had to get out any which way she could. And so there wasn't a lot of emotion showed from my mother, because she never really got that. And so there wasn't like a lot of I love yous and hugs. There was really none of that. I had to start saying I love you to my mother, who I knew loved me. She all my sports, she was there. She always took care of me. I knew she loved me, but she never said it. And it took for me to go through some of these medicine journeys to actually start saying I love you to my mother every time that I talked to her. I had to start that as an adult. I was damn near 30 years old. So it was kind of awkward, but now we just say it and it's regular. And to my brother as well, I say it to every time I talk to them. So that was something that I didn't experience growing up. And so I didn't have any role models, and that kind of really showed in my relationships. I was just sleeping around all the time. I tried to do a couple relationships with just cheating and doing whatever. And I had this like pretty serious relationship in my 20s, but I got caught up cheating and doing everything. And when I broke up with her, I really felt, I don't know what it was. It was deep. It was heavy. I felt like I was a fuck up. I felt like I was always just going to be like my father. And a lot of like emotion came over me in this time period, when normally I would have just like went and partied and tried to hook up with other girls. I kind of like took a step back for a few months and really tried to do some soul searching. And it was a little bit harder because I was doing drugs and drinking at that time and smoking a lot of weed and kind of numbing myself out. But I still was kind of reflecting on like, if I get into another relationship, I'm going to have to try to take this one serious. I was like 27 years old or whatever I was. And so then I started hanging out with my wife now, and she was just amazing. And, I still had this like kind of trauma cycle. Like I didn't want to let anybody in. I still had the armor up, right? I hadn't done these medicine ceremonies. I wasn't as available as I am now. But for some reason, after we hung out for like 5 or 6 months, she was trying to make it more serious. I was kind of like, I just got out of this other relationship. And then finally I just gave in, right? I was like, I'll give this thing a shot. And I told myself I wouldn't cheat, I would try to be better. And it took a lot of work, because that's why I think a lot of people, they don't have these really well-rounded, serious relationships, because if you're with the right soulmate or partner, you have to look at a lot of your shadows. Relationships in and of themselves are a ceremony. They're a way to look at the things, they're a mirror to yourself. Your significant other, if they're pushing you to be a better person, they're going to look at all the little things that they don't like and you get defensive about. Is like, most people don't want to change those. They just want to say, fuck it. We'll deal with that later. We'll sweep it under the rug. But a good relationship, you can't do that. One that has open communication. So they start to call you out on your little bullshit. And that's where you really mature. The most mature people are in serious, well-rounded, good communication, non-abusive relationships. But it's very hard. It's harder than even going to ceremony. If I take 5 grams of the medicine, it's going to do its job in the next couple hours and I'm going to be good. But it's the daily task. It's doing the dishes. It's cleaning up. It's, not annoying the fuck out of your wife and with your little bachelor style lifestyle that you're so used to. So I had to change so many things about myself. And then her family's a little bit more normal, mom's there, dad's there, middle class, they're not rich or anything, but, very normal middle class. They always hung out, did family trips, things that I wasn't used to. So also I got introduced to that, like what a real family kind of does. We go on vacation for Christmas, and we open presents on Christmas, and we do, all the birthdays, and we celebrate everything. And so that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to what the more like normal functioning kind of family looks like, even though, everyone's got their downfalls and their traumas. But for the most part, they're pretty normal family, I guess you would say. And from there, I started listening to, what's his name? Relationship theory, impact theory guy, Tom. So he has a podcast called Relationship Theory. So if anybody is struggling in their relationship, or maybe are single and wondering how to be better at relationships moving forward, I would definitely recommend Relationship Theory. I haven't listened to it in a few years, but when I was trying to be a better man and a better communicator and just better overall in relationships. I would listen to a lot of relationship theory podcasts. It's him and his wife, and they've really gotten into the weeds about, just communication and calling each other out and, really trying to find a balance between themselves and business and entrepreneurship. So I definitely recommend that podcast if no one's ever listened to it. And overall, it's just been really the best thing that's ever happened to me. Honestly, she's just made me so much better. When you want to be better, I push her to be better. She also used to party a lot, do a lot of things, and I've gotten her a lot healthier. And I'm sure you've witnessed that with your relationship. I know you kind of helped your wife along some health issues and things like that. So I don't know. I think that they really are the most magical, tough, hard, you're going to beat your head off the wall. And it takes a few years to really get into a groove and to really actually be able to see one another and know what makes them happy, what makes them sad, things you got to change. And it's always evolving, and you always got to keep getting better at it. And I like to keep getting better at things. I like to keep learning. And even if it's hard, I think overall it ends up making life a lot better.
That's beautiful. It made me think when he said for people that are not in a relationship, it made me think of something that we talk about in the retreats that I host with my partner, Michael Tierno, the Men of Integrity ones, that for men perhaps who are having a hard time finding a relationship or the motivation to go and find a relationship, that's perhaps the relationship side, listen to Relationship Theory, you said, is a podcast, will be the second step. But for a lot of them, getting the feminine energy alternatives out of their life, and whether that's gaming, social media, news, cannabis, alcohol, reducing those to have the motivation to go find somebody, I think is step one for a lot of men who are kind of like, oh, they're getting comfortable in being single and they don't want to, they already know that they don't want to deal with a relationship, but they're not really doing, they already get their substitute for feminine energy. And then that would be also something to work on and be prepared and get ready to do the work. And as you said, I think it's one of the most beautiful things is that when we're in a relationship, it's not only the love and the joys and all the fun stuff that we do together and not being alone, already being in a union, but also having that mirror that helps us keep growing. Because what's the point? I mean, even in physiologically, if we don't grow or die, there's no neutral. Also, I think the same thing with food and nutrients and all that. There's nothing neutral. You can't really eat a banana or eat something and think like, oh, like I'm sustaining my health. It's either it's life building energy or it's deteriorating life. That's my perspective. Perhaps it's black and white. Perhaps I don't get it. I'm not getting it correctly yet. But I think the same thing about relationships. It's either like people are finding somebody to be in a relationships to get back into the patterns that they got from their parents or from past life or ancestrally or whatnot, and they kind of keeping those patterns. They have a contract like, okay, as long as you keep me miserable and we're getting to fight about these things and I keep you miserable, and the fighting keeps going on. And unfortunately that's a lot of relationships, which is why divorce and separation and cheating, those percentages are super high. And then there's the ones who are like, all right, like I'm ready to be vulnerable, I'm ready to look into your eyes, I'm ready to say I'm sorry, I'm ready to take a step back. And I will say about myself, for a long time, the way that I was the way that I was coping with those shadows and growing in a relationship is I was using a little crotch called cannabis. So I would be in a fight, I would go and smoke and relax and have another perspective and then go and have a conversation. And over time, I was able to like really make a commitment of like, all right, I'm really going to deal with my shadows without the crotch, and like work on it and just like be in my feelings, the sensations in my body, and rather than react every time something comes up that upsets me or triggers me, I'm going to take a breath, get my awareness and respond to it and know when to respond. And I'm curious, in your relationship, if you have any, like, do you make a specific time to like go over things? I mean, a friend of mine, for example, him and his wife go, and this is also from Tim Ferriss, once a week, like every Monday every Monday evening, they get a glass of wine or something, or just like a candle, and they get all the things that perhaps happened in the past week that they want to hash out. I do not have a practice like this. I will say that. But I think, it's nice to hear if somebody has, to hear if you have any practices or some ways to work around those grievances that we have in relationships. Things it's a bunch of times small things accumulate and then it's like a moment of eruption. Like, all right, I'm leaving.
Yes, that's fun. That's actually funny. I don't have a weekly practice, and I know what you're talking about. I know a lot of people in successful relationships do have like the weekly huddle, and that's probably beneficial. And when my wife and I are on a little bit more of a normal schedule, probably will introduce something like that. But what I've found is, and this took a lot of work and a lot of communications and a lot of arguments and things in the beginning because we were partying more back then. And when you're drinking, you kind of just leads to more kind of, you're just a little bit more agitated and you can't control yourself as much. But what I found is really good is that, with us both being busy, both kind of being entrepreneurs and doing our thing, is that when you're not feeling like you've been loved, if you're not feeling like you've gotten any time or you need something, is to be vocal. Basically, is like, don't ever let things get too out of control to where it builds into that tornado, right? Let's quiet the storm before the tornado. So we want to, if we have both been busy and we haven't spent enough time together, and there happens to be a little 2-hour period where you're saying, I haven't, my wife will say, I need some attention. I need to feel loved. I need to whatever. And if I have basically almost anything going on, unless it's like a scheduled podcast or a call, like if I'm just going to be working in the office, I'll put that off and I'll attend to her. And it might put me behind a little bit. I might have to work later. I might have to get up earlier the next day, whatever that may be. I block that time for her. And so I don't know if that means having sex. I don't know if that means just hanging out and having a coffee or having lunch and just talking about whatever, phones down, that happens. And I found that works really well. And we do always have one full day a week that I don't plan any podcasts or anything, where we're just spending all day together. And sometimes it's just like household chores, but then a lot of times it's like date night, or we go to the beach, or we do whatever, go have a picnic, go to the museum, whatever we want to do. So we have one full day off together usually. And then also the other periodical breaks if someone's feeling like they haven't gotten enough love or attention, or we need to go to lunch and we just need to talk about things or talk about retreats or whatever needs to happen. We make sure that we're vocal about that. And it doesn't have to be, if you are vocal when you first start feeling the feelings, you won't be so equipped, or I don't know if equip's the best word, but you won't be as likely to just kind of cascade and blow up. You just want to kind of get to the root of it in the beginning, because if you sweep something under the rug and you sweep it under there long enough, then that's where that explosion happens. And the explosion is never good, because then someone else gets defensive, and then the whole thing ends up being this giant argument that could have been settled if someone was just a little bit more vocal in the beginning about, hey, my needs haven't been being met. I need to go have a date night. I need to go to lunch, or we just need to talk, sit here and not worry about work and not talk about retreats or talk about podcasts, and just be in love. And I make time for that if she says that. And I found that to be a pretty good way to kind of maneuver. And it does take a lot of work, because sometimes if the other person isn't open to receive that message, you say, well, I'm busy, I don't have time. So it does take kind of a conscious partner on both ends to be able to drop whatever they're doing, make some time for the relationship, because ultimately that is the most important. So fuck the podcast, fuck the research. Like, you got to put the relationship first, and then everything else will fall in place, in my opinion.
Oh, that's huge. What you said right now is huge, and I think that's hard for a lot of men. It's hard for a lot of people, but I think a lot of men, especially the ambitious ones, the driven ones, to say, like, I'm going to have to put my growth, let's say, or my satisfaction for my own path, because everybody's walking their own path individually, and also we're walking our path as a couple, let's say, and as a family, and then there's a relationship between a parent and a child, a parent and and their parent. I mean, there's so many relationships going on. And I think what you said is beautiful, that to prioritize our especially the sacred relationship that we have, the one that we're in union, we're walking the path, soulmates, however people want to see it, and especially is working as a family. And I see it even more important once we have kids, for the men to prioritize the wife or the mother, or however relationship they have. It could be also with the same sex, but to prioritize that person who's the main caretaker, because that's cascading for the kids. And I love that you said, like, one day a week. I mean, that's I've set my eyes 5 years ago on a 5-year plan to do one date night per week with my wife, and that even doesn't happen. So like a full day, that's huge and that's beautiful, and that's a really good amount of time to connect and be. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of spontaneous stuff, and whether you plan it or not, I mean, you're hanging, and as you said, you're in love. You're in that space, and I mean, kudos to you. That's huge. That's amazing, and it's especially amazing to hear somebody who did not, and I did not get that kind of guidance either. My parents are still together. They have a great relationship, but it's not like I've seen my father come and, I use the word containment, and contain my mother to that extent, to make her feel like heard and loved and this and that. And, also, I think you touched on retreats. So like, do you and your wife co-host the retreats together? I'm not in the know there. Do you work on this together?
Yeah, my wife is mostly the brains behind the retreat. She's absolutely amazing. It's especially because we do a lot of women's stuff, because that's kind of her crowd. So I'm a little bit in the background cooking all the meals from scratch, which I think does make a lot of sense, actually, because when we have these women on retreat, as we're talking about right here, a lot of them have real masculine energy back at home, right? They're probably doing the cooking. They're probably doing the cleaning. So for someone in his masculine form to be doing all the cooking and cleaning for them feels really good. So it's like a role reversal, right? But for all of the workshops and the yoga and the ecstatic dance and all the breath work, it's all led by other females, so that they're in a safe container to be able to express themselves and talk about their husbands and talk about their life, and they feel seen and they feel heard. Because if there's a guy in the actual workshops, it might throw off the dynamic a little bit, right? There might be a little bit less likely to talk about their relationship problems. But when it's all females, it's kind of empowering. And then I do the Kambo ceremony at the last day, and that's always optional, but we do throw that in there. I think it really helps to we do a lot of intention setting and a lot of journaling and a lot of self-limiting beliefs. And we didn't really talk about this in Kambo in the beginning, but I think that whatever you kind of set your intention around before the Kambo ceremony, it can really, really be highly effective at intention setting. So there is an energetic component to Kambo as well. We talked about a lot of the meat suit, the physical reality, the parasites, the bacteria, but there is a spiritual component to Kambo as well. So I like to add that in on the end after they've done the ecstatic dance, they've done the journaling, they've done the breath work, they've done a lot of emotional work, and they've been fed all weekend. And then we can set that intention, say it out loud if you want to, and then really bring that in and hone it in with the Kambo at the end. So there's kind of a lot of uncomfortable stuff that we like to do. We don't like to just go do yoga and sit around and drink wine and eat. I like it to be kind of like a transformation style ceremony. That's just what I'm into. I'm into more like growth. And so it's a good dynamic. It's mostly females that kind of like the one male be in there and taking care of them. And then I do the Kambo, but mostly it's led by my wife because it's mostly women's retreats. We've done one co-ed. We've only had 2 men show up. It's interesting as we're talking about this, like men still are a little resilient into giving into something like a retreat. It just depends. Like if you're in the yoga community, we kind of have some, but then if we do a co-ed retreat, we still might only get like 2 males. So then that, like I said, that kind of throws off that dynamic. You want it to be more like 50-50 if you're going to do a co-ed, and so that it's a mixture. But we seem every time we've tried to throw a co-ed, we don't get really that many males. And I think they're still a little bit more hesitant. They'd rather go take a business course, or they'd rather try to make money instead of connecting to themselves. And because as men, I'm not sure why, and I think it is shifting, but we only look at growth is in the form of like finances. That's where men really feed their ego, and that's where they feel validated. How much money did I make last year? How many things can I buy? And I'm more into the emotional aspect is probably more important than the finances, because you can work yourself to death, and there's so many ways to make money. But what are you passionate about? Are you happy about it? You're working 80 hours a week. Do you love it? I bet you don't. You don't feel good because you're not cooking your own food. You're running off of stimulants all day. You don't have time to meditate. You don't have time to work out, but you made 250 grand this year. What the fuck does that matter? You don't have any emotional capacity, any emotional intelligence. Your relationship's failing because you're at work all day. You don't have time for your family. You don't have time for community. So what does it really matter? So we have to kind of shift the narrative on how men view growth. Because right now it's really just about finances and what we can buy and what we can afford. And you're going to work 80 hours a week to take one vacation with your family all year. And you're going to be so burnt out and tired for half of the vacation because all you did is work. And it's really not, doesn't make sense. So we have to figure out how we can, yes, draw in money. I love to make money. That's what another downfall I talk about in my podcast is the spiritual community gets a little too tapped in to their feminine sometimes, and they don't like to attract money. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying you shouldn't make money and you should only work on your emotional capabilities. That's not where I'm at. I think that you can do both at the same time, figure out something that you're passionate about, and then figure out how to make money on it at the same time. The road's longer and the road's harder. That's why people don't do it. When you're passionate about something, you're in the fucking grind for a minute because you're trying to figure out how to attract a tribe who's passionate about the same things you are, and then how you can uplift them, coach them, combo, whatever it is that you like to do. And that takes a lot more work than just going to sell real estate and making 300 grand a year, but then just driving yourself to the ground. So really the narrative needs to shift on how men look at growth and how they look at personal development, because the emotional part is how you're going to live a long, happy life. And the nutrition piece is how you're going to feel good. I'm not worried about people who are more successful than me in jobs that they don't like, because I'm 35 and I keep getting younger. And I look at other 35-year-olds and they look like they're 50. So what's going to happen when we're both 50? You're going to be overweight, tired. How are you making money now? You're not. You're waiting until the day you can retire. And I'm going to be trying to build businesses when I'm 65. So I really don't worry about timelines, and I don't worry about finances right in the moment. I'm more about spiritual growth, connection, building community, and then the money will come. Because once you're passionate and you can add value to the marketplace, you'll always make money. So we need to really shift the perspective. Men need to be on more of these retreats, whether it's a medicine retreat like yours or a retreat like mine with breath work and some emotional work. But for now, we're kind of focused on the females because it seems like those tend to fill up more. But my wife is the brains behind the retreats. We do a lot of deep work, a lot of introspection. It's amazing. We kind of get little Airbnbs out in nature. So you're filled with nature and kayaks and stuff on your downtime. But that's my little rant on men and why men need to shift their perspective, and as well as my retreats.
No, that's amazing. You nailed it on the head with so many things, especially when it comes to men. And also kudos to you for giving credit to your wife, which I think a lot of men would have a hard time with that, right? Thinking like, oh, my wife makes things happen. And I've seen this recently with a farmer, and I get it, older farmers, older, old school, they want to feel validated, as I said. And a lot of times that's what they have is a validation. They're bringing the bread and they're doing some physical hard work, they're tough macho men. And then they're neglecting what I'm seeing, so perhaps they even have the mental capacity, the physical capacity, but the emotional and spiritual capacities, which I've been in the same boat, were kind of like close to zero, like forget who needs those, right? And you nailed it on the head on like, this is where we're going. And perhaps some people are jumping on the boat and some people want to stay behind. And I'm also thinking about the amount of toxicity that there is in the world today and how much it is compounded since, let's say, 40, 50 years ago when our parents were younger. So now, for the men who are listening and they're 35 and, they're making 300 grand and they're at the gym, they look like they're muscular, but they have a little bit of pains and such. And they're not really paying attention to food and emotional and spiritual stuff. Their spirit is knocking on the door saying like, you don't really like doing this job. But they're medicating, they're drinking, either during the daytime or in the evening, they take a glass of wine and a little nightcap, cannabis, kratom, a bunch of medications. They get to 50, they're not even looking right now at retiring. They have so many bills racked up. They got to go now do some PMF. They're looking into all kinds of healing modalities because now they really have some chronic conditions going on. This is the day and age we're living in. So my recommendation there is for the men who are listening, like, they got so far in the conversation, perhaps they're not in that boat, but their women are listening. They're like, I could help my men get up level his stuff. And I want to feel, as for the women, they want to feel more contained and want to feel like they have stronger relationships beyond the walls and the nice things and the nice couch and the nice car and the schools. Yeah, there's a deeper level of love that I'm sure they're looking for, and connection and being seen and all that. So, there's a lot of work to be done. And I mean, it's been apparent in a lot of retreats, the Joe Dispenza meditation retreats, and I've attended one of them a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years by now. And especially back then, like the amount of women was like 90% in the room, there maybe more than 90%. It's slowly starting to be more and more men doing this work, which is amazing. It's what we need. But still, I mean, in terms of vulnerability, and I think also going ancestrally and how things work, and the men would go and wake up in the morning, they gotta get shelter going on, they gotta hunt, they gotta bring the food. The women are all like figuring out relationships with the other women, with the kids. They're watching, they're cooking, they're connected to the land in that way. It's an interesting point in time we're in, because definitely there's awakening going on. And I think, to me, the first point of connecting to life, to nature, to myself, was in cooking. I just got into cooking, and I don't know if it was the 4-hour chef from Tim Ferriss back then, but I'm like, especially when I was in CrossFit, I was like, I want to be healthy, I want to be strong, I want to be able to perform, I enjoy living in my body, and let's say competing to some extent. I wasn't competing like professionally by any means, but kind of in a small environment. And competing against myself, like, can I get younger? Can I feel stronger? Can I feel more limber? So that started with that connection to food. Like, oh, paleo, like what the hell is that? What's grass fed? Like, are those cows not eating grass? Like, I thought they were grazing. Oh, you're telling me like they're eating like corn and soy, and this shit is bad for me? That was the first point. And it's still, I cook over 90% of the meals. We cook, my wife and I, but I cook the most of it because I really got into cooking, into ingredients and what goes together, and optimizing my digestion. And she was what I call misdiagnosed with Crohn's, and she had some ulcers when I met her, and the frozen pizzas and working hard. And I want to touch on that. A lot of women today, because there's so much masculine energy, now we're as a society, especially in the Western world, especially in the United States, we are we're praising women that are working and making money, because now we're trying to equalize the genders, and we're trying to equalize the sexes in that way of like, oh, like making money and being important in some ways, and showing up at work and all that. And I mean, I'm going to quickly touch on it. Even Minnie Mouse, apparently they changed Minnie Mouse's Disney changed her outfit from a dress to like a suit, like blue pants, blue jacket, like Minnie Mouse is in a suit now. And I think it's beautiful. My wife she works full time ever since I know her, and she loves working, and that's great and all, but also connecting to her feminine side and knowing that that's not the end of all things. And a lot of people are stuck in that rut. So yeah, and I think a lot of times it takes a man to start stepping into some more feminine roles, whether in the household, just by listening, like actually listening, not like looking in the eyes and like thinking about like, I don't know, like whatever they have to do for work, or I forget what it's even called, the league, the football, fantasy football league, and all that going on. And like,
don't get me started on sports.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing on sports, and I always was like this. I would much rather play the sport than spectate somebody else doing the sport. I think the spectation, or however the word is for it, I'm taking here the card of like, I'm a foreigner, I came from Israel, so I don't really know some words, but watching sports and really rooting for the teams and gaining weight while we're doing this with beer and all this, it could be fun, because sometimes it brings people together, and especially families, and I'm thinking about father-son relationships that are not able to say I love you on the phone, or all these things. So now they're hanging out, they're showing love and all that, and that's great and all. But a lot of times, just being on the side of watching somebody else do the sport and really being so into the team that, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of spectators, they don't have any say in the team. It's their team, but they never play. They're not even donating any money to this, except for the tickets and the time. But it's an interesting thing. It's another form of getting feminine energy that a lot of men do, because it brings them some sort of dopamine response. They're having some sort of stakes there. It reminds me of gaming. There's some sort of a gaming aspect there that hits that dopamine in a way that, like, all right, I'm gonna watch sports with my friends. I'm gonna play games. I'm gonna medicate with cannabis, alcohol, and all that. And I'm just gonna be in this groove of men. And like, oh, I'm not gonna show emotion. I'm gonna get laid. And a lot of it is the programming, it's the music, it's TV. It's so cool to be the guy on Mad Men, who has the wife and kids at home, and he's traveling, and all these young women come to him, and he's sipping whiskey in the office. The truth is, that comes with a lot of misery. Because the soul, I say it, and a lot of people say it now. We're soul beings living in this third dimensional body, and it's not the opposite. It's not that we're physical beings and also have a soul. Anyways, that's my little rant there on men and physicality and soul. And yeah, I think I do want to touch on one more thing. Is you were talking about finding passion, working, and being the grind. When I started doing what I'm doing now, and we're doing the podcast, I'm doing my retreats, and I'm doing, holistic lifestyle coaching, awakening, guidance, and all that. It's not that I transitioned 100%. I'm like, oh, I'm going to stop working and this is all going to happen. I'm going to get all these clients. I kept doing what I was doing to make money. I kept building websites. I kept designing all kinds of graphic stuff. I was maintaining people's websites. I did all kinds of groundwork that I did not perhaps enjoy as much, especially once I awakened. But it was the means to an end to do what my new passion was. So over time, I dialed down when I started getting more business from my new passion in business and what I feel like I'm called to do and my bigger gifts in the world. But I didn't let that go. I still was like, all right, I'm going to support my family. And as you said, in the spiritual community, perhaps a lot of times, like, we want it all to be, bells and whistles. Like, if I'm doing something that is out of alignment with where I'm at today, then I'm not going to do it. But like, at the end of the day, we especially as men, we're going back to men, we want to support and provide for our families. That brings us joy. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that earlier.
No, I totally agree. And I'm in it right now. I still have a regular job that I do 3-4 days a week serving tables, and that provides me money to pay for all these biohacks and all these other things on top of my coaching and my combo. And it's slowly shifting. Like, I work less, but I don't want anybody to get the idea that you can't have a regular job. I like that style of job because I can just leave for a month if I want to. I can leave for 2 weeks. Someone else will go make my money. I can work 3 days a week. I can work 5 days a week. It just really depends on what I need. So, slowly, it's the most flexible job for what I want. And you make the most amount of money in a short period of time. I don't have to take home emails. I don't have to worry about it. I just show up and do that job. But I have been steadily for the last 4 or 5 years trying to figure out what my passion is and how I'm going to grow and how I'm going to network and how I'm going to show up in the world. And I would be a lot further along if it wasn't for the Lyme disease stuff. I probably spent, we didn't even really get into that, but I probably spent $100,000 on biohacks and supplements and doctors. It's just been an insane amount of money. So I've been having to keep that job even more so than a normal person who just felt healthy and wanted to dive into their business, because I've had so many different investments that I've had to make over the past few years. And I had to, I couldn't travel. I couldn't really go see family. I was just really focused on making money and then figuring out how to pay for all these medical bills. So I had a little bit of a different situation with the Lyme disease that kind of set me back, but I'm still not going to focus on that. And I'm still just going to make money in the time being, figure out how to keep growing my passions. And it's growing quicker than I could even imagine. We're both on the upswing, both of our businesses right now. So, probably in the next year or so, I would imagine I probably wouldn't even have to go in there. But for now, it's putting food on the table. I like to buy White Oak Pastures grass-fed meat. I like to take about 700 supplements. So for now, that's how I do all my experimentation and how I do all my things. Yeah, I'm kind of burning the candle at both ends, but it doesn't feel like it because what I'm doing in my business, I'm passionate about. So, it is a little bit more work, like you said, when you're trying to make money and shift into your passion. But if your overall goal at the end of the day is to be fully in your passion, you're going to have to kind of burn the candle at both ends for a little time period and while you make that shift.
That's beautiful. I'll throw in one more suggestion there for anybody who wants to start making the shift is to focus on one small thing at a time. So if you're thinking about starting retreats and in a business and a podcast and all that, like, focus on one thing, because otherwise, and from experience, I will say you might get overwhelmed with the amount of things that you want to do, and then nothing gets done. It's like, oh, I didn't deliver on this, and start feeling not enough. And I already deal with the not enoughness as is, because by now I've taken a few things. I have a 7-month-old that in here, and ever since he was born, once again, a new what we call a new variable, my wife and I, is in our lives. And now, between sleep and like nanny not coming in, people getting sick, all that. So that's, focus on less things, deliver on them, start building momentum, and stack those things, like kind of stacking habits. I do want to ask, because you were telling me and showing me some of the customized nootropics that you have a membership for. And I love that you said, like, you keep your job to be able to not only heal yourself now, rather than like, oh, I'm just gonna work on my passion and heal myself later on. Like, you're working on performance. People, listen, like, your body is your instrument of consciousness. You want to get better, you want to become more articulate, you want to be able to take on more things and show up and be able to connect to your emotions. You're going to have a great meat to work with. So healing yourself, while simultaneously doing everything else, is important. And I want to hear about the customized nootropics. I asked you then, but I want to get a reminder for myself of what they are, what's the protocol, what's the company, or anything else that you have to share on that optimization.
Yeah. So actually, I just recorded a podcast with Mark Effinger on Friday. It's not out yet. Maybe it'll be out by the time this show comes out. I'm not sure when you're going to start dropping all of these. But I've played around, especially with all the brain fog that I had for years now, off and on, with different nootropics, the qualias, the alpha brains, the different, alpha GPC, Huperzine A, all these things that are supposed to upregulate different neurochemistry and help you have better verbal fluency, better memorization, short-term memory, just, more lateral thinking and word recall, things like that. And then I got introduced to this brand, Nootopia. And I didn't take it for a while because I was kind of doing some more detox from the Lyme. So my brain fog was pretty shitty. So I was like, I don't really want to take a nootropic. And I already have brain fog, kind of like counterintuitive. But then when I started the podcast back up, I ordered a box of this Nootopia because I had just heard such great things about it. And it's from my favorite supplement company, Bioptimizers. It's their sister company, which is called Nootopia. And I've been taking Bioptimizers products for years. I take the digestive enzymes, the Masszymes. When I was doing keto, I took the Capex, and it's kind of more for like fat digestion. They have the best sleep supplement that I found on the market. And then they came out with these customized nootropics, and it was super interesting, right? Because we all are different. We have different toxicities. We have different, biological needs, different demands. Some people just want to be happy and flow. Some people really want to crank out 14 hours a day worth of work. It really just depends on what kind of like shift you're looking for. And so you go on to Nootopia's website and you do like a 20-minute survey. And they're going to kind of look at like your age, your weight, are you sensitive to caffeine? Are you allergic to anything? What are you trying to get out of? And from that survey, they customize a little box that they send to you. It's a little black box. It's the most amazing box you could ever receive in the mail. If you're an entrepreneur or a performer, I just can't get enough of it. I'm on a couple right now. And what it is, there's like, one's called Brain Flow, one's called Apex, one's called Nectar X, and they all have, it comes with a little booklet so that you can kind of know what state it'll, that each one will shift you in. And then you take one at a time, and sometimes you start doing two maybe next time, or then you play around with taking like one Brain Flow and one Apex and see what that does. Or, you can kind of start to customize them over time after like which shift you're going to get. And the cool thing about it is they'll send you a survey each month, and you can tell them how happy you were with each individual capsule. And you can go in there and you can say, all right, the Brain Flow made me feel a little good, gave me some energy, but I wish it gave me a little bit more creativity. And then you can go in there and adjust the Brain Flow and bump up the creativity. So then they'll customize your next set of pills. And now the Brain Flow will have more creativity, or it'll have more energy, or whatever it is. And it's crazy. So each month you can customize it, and you can basically give them feedback. And I haven't played with the app, but I guess the app is really the way to go. I might start playing with that. They have an app that basically each day you take capsules, you can give them feedback, and then you don't have to do the survey each month. They'll customize the stacks each month based off of what you put in the app. So to me, they almost work too good. It's hard for me to say, like, they literally will have your brain on fire for hours. So for podcasting, for deep work, for research, I mean, they're just amazing. They have these one called Dopa Drops, which really I think is probably one of the most helpful ones for the modern society. Like, even with this technology we're doing here, and then the social media and the emails, we're really just dinging that dopamine. So it's like a slow release Dopa Drop that kind of helps us have like more dopamine to release. From my understanding, I'm not a wizard in this. It's very like scientific, but these are different than normal nootropics as well, that just regulate neurotransmitters. They really try to look at the root of like why people have the brain fog and don't have the energy. So they have like compounds in there that kind of downregulate neuroinflammation. They have B vitamins in there, which kind of help boost up enzymatic activity in the brain. And then they have the plant compounds inside of there that kind of also upregulate neurotransmitters. So it's super interesting. And the thing about them is they have like a team of PhDs overseas who just literally are extracting compounds, playing with it. Like they switch the formulation so much that the packaging can't even keep up with the new formulation sometimes. So you might get a package in the mail that has an ingredient list on there, but they might be missing an ingredient or two, or some need to be switched. Like that's how often that they're like updating these things. It's like it's a nonstop like optimization group. The people over at Bioptimizers are literally the most loving, caring. Like I talk to Matt on Instagram all the time. He's coming on the show in a couple of weeks to talk about the sleep supplement. I mean, they're just an amazing group of people, and their kind of motto is best in class or pass, basically. So like if they can't make the best supplement in the category that they're trying to make, then they'll pass on it. So like their magnesium, by far and away the best on the market, in my opinion. Has like all 7 forms of magnesium, super bioavailable. I mean, a lot of magnesium supplements that people are taking really don't even really get absorbed that well. So, I mean, everything they do is great. And I think the nootropics are just revolutionary. I do have a little code I can throw out for anybody who's listening and wants to try it. I'm an affiliate through them. So the name of my podcast is Integrative Thoughts. So you can use Integrative Thoughts 10, and that'll get you 10% off anything that they have over there, the sleep supplement, the Newtopia, anything like that. But I think that it's the best brain hacking supplement on the market.
That's awesome. Well, and I'll throw this link in the show notes, and I'll use it myself because I mean you got me excited about it then, and then you got me more excited about it now, especially now that I'm about to record more podcasts, and I've seen how you performed on it a few weeks ago.
The podcast is where I really like. I make sure I'm on them for the podcast, and then I have some for my other days if I'm doing research. But really, when you're trying to have a 2-3 hour chat and you want your brain to be on fire, you definitely want some Newtopia.
That's beautiful. And okay, so I want to wrap up this conversation with one more question, and it doesn't have to be from recent times. It could be from back when, or not perhaps directly to you. But I'd love if you can recall and describe an experience that blew your mind, one that we have not talked about yet on this podcast, at least.
One that blew my mind. So we've already talked about psychedelics and Kambo, so I won't actually go there, but there's a new wave of, it's not really a one existing experience, as in it's not something that happens on day one. But what I've been getting into, where I think most people are lacking even in the health community, is this concept of minerals. And I've been diving deep into minerals and doing some remineralization programs in the past year. And for me, that's became like the biggest spiritual experience that one can really go through, because you can go do this ayahuasca and it actually will deplete minerals because it's such a force to be reckoned with, right? Like this is a stressful experience. And if you already are very unhealthy, you're already lacking minerals, it can actually further deplete those and make you depressed. But people don't realize that minerals basically control all of the enzymatic functions in your body. And the soil's been depleted of minerals. This is the reason why we eat force of nature. This is the reason why we eat white oak pastures, because of the mineral content. But it's not enough, because unnatural environmental problems such as heavy metals, plastics, toxins, those all affect how you absorb those minerals. And getting on a mineral balancing program, people don't realize that these heavy metals have the potential, not the potential, they do, to affect neurochemistry. And I think a lot of the thyroid issues, the anger, the depression, the inability to actually process emotions, we see that so often, right? We think people need psychedelics and we think that they need breath work, and those are great tools. But the problem is we can't really retrace and process a lot of emotions because of the heavy metals and the toxins that are taking place in our body. So when you remineralize, it actually allows your body to release a lot of the heavy metals. And then the cells can function better. And then the neurotransmitters work in the correct manner, the dopamine, the serotonin. So we're using these nootropics, but a lot of times I think people need the nootropics because the actual regular biology isn't functioning correctly. And I think that minerals really, really are the backbone to how we begin to process emotions and traumas and feelings, how we feel good. We shouldn't need nootropics and psychedelics to walk around feeling good. This body was meant to be happy and to be euphoric on a regular basis. And I learned that firsthand with getting super sick. And it's actually been my biggest superpower. And that's the reason why I dove into so much of this health and research, was because I was so sick and I was so depressed, and I had never had anxiety. I had never been depressed. So I'm like, what's going on? And people don't realize that, the average person can have 20, 50 different like hidden infections in their body, little viral infections, herpes, Epstein-Barr, all these things that come along when the immune system's just gone awry, different gut dysbiosis. All these things are a bigger problem on a macro scale of people being mineral deficient, eating seed oils, having high inflammation. So I've been kind of almost had my paradigm shattered when I started to research minerals and how they just affect almost every mechanism in the body. So where I've been pushing people towards lately is like, the blood tests are cool and the saliva tests are cool. But I think that if you can get a good, really, really good HTMA practitioner and start playing around with the minerals that your body needs and releasing a lot of these calcifications and heavy metals that occur in the body, you'll have a spiritual experience in and of itself. So that's been the most mind-blowing research that I've come across in the past year.
Wow, that's huge. And do you have any practitioner to recommend for HTMA, which is this hair? What is it? What is it for? Hair, trace minerals?
So there is such a wide variety of people who read HTMAs, which is hair tissue mineral analysis. You want to find a really good practitioner. There's a couple that I know of. Clark Engelbert is probably the top of his game. He's been on like Matt Blackburn's podcast. He's been on Wendy Myers' podcast. He's a bit more expensive, but he does an amazing job. The information that he puts out, I think his Instagram is Nutritional Analytics. So even if you're not going to do a hair test, you should follow him and just see the information he puts out about heavy metals and how a mineral balancing program really does help to excrete the metals and how people feel on that. I mean, he has children's doing it. He works with kids with autism, all kinds of things. Right. And then I use a guy who's actually coming on my podcast next week. His name's Aaron. His Instagram is Redox Stasis. I think it might be like redox.stasis, something like that. He puts out amazing information as well. And, I've been taking minerals for a long time, and then I started to realize like, oh, it's actually more customized is what it needs. And your ratios need to be in place. And they don't just focus on minerals. They have different B vitamins that are in the program and supplements they recommend. Sometimes they give you like some adrenal gland support, thymus and spleen, different things that kind of help the body and different digestive enzymes. So it's a detox protocol, and and it's hard. And if anyone's seen the clip on my Instagram, I interviewed the mineral shaman, and he talks about how minerals play out in basically the psychedelic world. And I had a little clip on my Instagram where he basically talks about like, if you're not able to discern how all these emotions that come up, because when you are actually detoxing, you're kind of stuck in the past. It's almost bizarre, where I think that it's I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, like the trauma or the metals, because it seems like traumatic experiences potentially have the ability to affect cellular function. And when you have poor cellular function or, immune system that's gone awry from trauma, then some of these toxins are more able to stay where they need to be. And it's almost like you hold on to them more. And if you look at people who have taken like the ACE, have you ever done an ACE score? It's kind of based on, it's like a little survey. It's ACE. I can't remember what it stands for. I pretty much scored like 100%. Like I had all the traumas that were on this survey. And like the people who score high on these ACEs, they're like how many ever more times likely to have a chronic condition when they grow up, or an autoimmune condition. And so there's something to do with the traumas that affect, I think, cellular function, and then people's ability to detox and excrete metals. And some people just start off poor, like, the mom had a bunch of mercury fillings, so they started off with mercury poisoning just from a kid, and then it didn't display itself until later when they started eating shitty food and whatever else happened. They had a lead exposure. but it's basically boils down, in my opinion, to just the minerals and the mineral content in it. And it's slow. And the thing is, when you are excreting these metals from remineralizing, the mineral shaman was like, you have to be able to discern, because when you're in ceremony and you take something like psilocybin or ayahuasca, you're in this safe container and you know that everything that comes up is part of the process. But you have to deal with these kind of emotional swings, mood swings, and retracing and reprocessing when you're remineralizing in your day-to-day real life. So you have to be able to take a step back. You need to learn how to do some breath work or do some meditation to be able to kind of distance yourself from the emotions that are coming up, because it's part of the healing process. And we're looking for these shortcuts when it comes to psychedelics. And I think they have a time and place, but we need to get to the root cause of why people actually can't deal with their anxiety and with their emotions. And a lot of times I think it boils down to the toxins. Just my opinion.
Wow. That's huge. That's super illuminating. And yeah, I've never done an HTMA test. And,
I got a guy.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm going to get into it. I've been operating pretty well and processing and all that, but it is, when you get into this world, it's about optimization. You want to be able to, as we talked about, nootropics and everything in relationships and fatherhood and husbandry and all that. So yeah, definitely want to take it to the next level.
Yeah, brother, I've been remineralizing for a long time. Like just kind of like winging it, like, we need some selenium, I'll take some selenium. Oh, we need some copper, I'll take some copper. We need something, and trying to play with the ratios. And, I still got an HTMA back that was very off balance. So I think that while just taking minerals on their own is great, because we've kind of demineralized the water, especially if you use a filter that doesn't remineralize it, where everyone's big into ROs and other filters where you're just drinking pretty much like dead plain water. And if you drink a gallon of plain water, you'll actually demineralize yourself even more, because it's just the water's going to flush out more of the minerals. So I'm not against people putting the salts and the minerals and everything on their food and in their water, but I think each person is dealing with different chronic infections and different heavy metals that HTMA, read by a very, very good trained practitioner, will get you on a customized approach for yourself. Because, my wife is taking different supplements from him than I am, because we had different mineral ratios, right? So, and from that, he can even tell, like, if you have hypothyroid or if you have different hormone issues going on, he'll basically be like, I can tell you're fatigued, I can tell you're hypothyroid, things like that, all from mineral ratios.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I've been doing, the bamboo salt, the shilajit, and all that stuff. I have a filter that doesn't no RO anymore. I used to do RO and then remineralize and let it sit with crystals and all that. But still, this is kind of like the shooting everywhere. And I've been taking spleen and organ meats and all that. But that's just kind of like the generalization, like, this, an intuition too. Some muscle testing and all that, like asking my body with like the duck bill test, but I'm not going to get into it right now. Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you for sharing so much about so many things. And I'm sure we're going to have a follow-up in a few months or so. So many things. We're growing individually and hopefully together too. I told Matt a while ago when I met him, which is only a few months ago, but already feel pretty close to you, that we're going to do some retreats together, and especially as we talked about men. So I focus on my retreats, the Men of Integrity retreats on men, and we're going to be bringing this work to more men with Kambo, with breath work, with emotional. So if you're listening to this and you're interested and you're like, you know what, Matt, Yoni, like, get this going on. All right, shoot us a message. Find me on Telegram, on the website, on Instagram, wherever that is. Just reach out. Give us a motivation. We're going to get it going faster. So anyways, brother, thank you so much. Can you tell everybody where to find you, the podcast, everywhere else to get in touch with you, Kambo?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram. Every once in a while I'll post on like a TikTok or a Facebook, but I'm most responsive and active on Instagram. The handle is at Integrative Matt. So just Integrative, then my name, Matt. And you'll see my website linked there, but it is integrativethoughts.com. And I have a bunch of information about Kambo on there. And then you can reach out to me with an email there if you want any kind of like maybe health coaching or anything like that. And then all of my podcasts are linked in there. The show is called Integrative Thoughts. You can also find that anywhere like Spotify, Apple, Google, anything like that.
Amazing, amazing, brother. All right. Thank you so much. And see you next time, everybody. Aho and namaste.
Thank you, brother. Love you, man.
Love you, brother. Take care, everybody. Well, lovely beings, I hope you enjoyed and were inspired by this conversation as much as I was. You can find the full show notes and all episodes on my website at yonihavana.com/podcast. If you are a man and you are called to do transformational work to become a better man, to find and grow the divinity within you, and you are longing a community of masculine men who share a passion for growth, please check out Men of Integrity by going to moi.community. Lastly, if you are enjoying the Yoni Havana podcast, I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to leave us a rating and a review on your podcast app of choice. The Yoni Havana podcast is a brand new show, and your support would help reach new people by rating higher on the algorithms. Also, your feedback would help me deliver the best experience to you as the show keeps evolving. Much love and a big aho. See you on the next one.